move on to the last speaker in this session, Professor Nalaka Mendis. Professor Mendis is the Emeritus Professor of Physiology of Psychiatry at the University of Colombo. Graduated from the Colombo University in 1971 and obtained membership and fellowship of the Royal College of Psychiatrists in 1978 and in 1987. He joined the Department of Psychiatry, Colombo Medical School in 1974 and left the university in 2011. His significant achievements in psychiatry include increasing the psychiatric training component both at undergraduate and postgraduate levels, as well as promoting mental health training among health professionals. He is the founder of the National Council for Mental Health, SAHNEA, and Community Mental Health Services, thereby raising the visibility of mental health and community mental health in Sri Lanka. He has been in the forefront of several developmental activities such as development and formalization of medical ethics and research ethics programs in the Colombo Medical Faculty. Professor Nalaka Mendis has multiple academic, professional publications and is involved in numerous committees, commissions, boards and institutes in Sri Lanka and overseas. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Nalaka Mendis will now speak on the emerging concept of mental health, its relevance to personal growth, health and illness. Over to you, Professor Nalaka Mendis.
Where is it? Where is it? Can you find this? Thank you. Thank you very much, Anula. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon. When Professor Narada Varnasurya and Rizvi Sharif called me one day and said that whether I would like to come and address you, I was quite happy to do that. And of course, I didn't have a choice and they gave me the topic. And I would like to concentrate on a very mundane area, but nevertheless, I think it's probably one of the most important areas without which you can't go ahead with any of these things that we talked about. I don't have an institution. This is where I live. It's called Happy Valley. It was actually established by a man called Samuel Langdon in 1888. Now it's called Ditalawa. It's one of the most beautiful places. And Samuel Langdon, incidentally, is a person who introduced science education to Sri Lanka. And he was the person who established Richmond College Galle. And he also established the first reformatory in Ditalawa, but still it's there in 1888. So I would like you to I'll try and be brief as much as possible, take 4 messages actually. The first is the well-being is an important human aspiration. That's the word to remember. It's an aspiration, an important component of human development, which has been already mentioned, which I'm not going to go into details. The second message is health, well-being and mental health are rich, holistic concepts, central to personal growth. These are very big words, which I don't think I can explain in a matter of 20 minutes. But I'm just at least trying to, inform you, but there are issues of this nature. And community development, already it has been mentioned about sharing, about working together, all that. Because none of these things are possible unless the basic mental well-being and mental health issues are recognized and developed. Then the third issue is determining and enhancing, how to enhance these kinds of things in our society. And there are 2 ways, social and individual approaches. And the last issue is the issue in Sri Lanka. During the last 40 years that I have been working here, I have never felt comfortable because all the time I'm learning things. As was mentioned earlier, there are so many things that are happening around the world. There are so many things that are happening in each of our lives as well as the subject area that we are working in. But generally they are predictable. But when I see people, every single person who comes to me even now is an individual, is a separate person. It's very, very difficult to understand within a matter of 10, 15, 20 minutes. They are very different people. So you got to understand that issue and try try to understand the reason behind it. Now, during the last 20-30 years, these kinds of things are happening in a big way. During the last about 20-30 years, meditation, when Deepak Chopra came to Sri Lanka about 10 years ago, it was so big, the crowd, they couldn't accommodate in the hall. There are so many people who seem to be having a vacuum in their lives. They want something to, fulfill their lives. These are happening in corporate sector. People, Suryarachi is having a field day, he organizing all these kinds of things, reduce the stresses and strains in their work. There's a beautiful center close to our house in Diethalava, where there's a well-being clinic run by a German national who comes, people come from Germany for about 3 weeks. Every 3 weeks they are going through this experience. It's a beautiful setup. The Diethalava hospital is a very small place. Every month the people get together and start talking about their problems. Unheard even in Colombo. People seem to be wanting something, to get together, to interact. And once a month they come and sell their stuff in the Diethalava hospital Pola. These are people who are attending what they call the mental health clinic. There isn't a psychiatrist even in Diethalava hospital. So there are fascinating things that are happening. You probably would know there's a thing called a positive mind club in Sri Lanka. There are people who are joining together and who are talking about the positive mental health in Sri Lanka. But it doesn't happen in the university, it doesn't happen in the formal sectors, but it does happen in the informal sector. One of the old mental hospitals in Colombo, commonly called Arcade now, Independence Arcade, was the Colombo Asylum in 1888. Now it's a well-being center. Everybody comes and enjoys that place. Suman Fernando, who is a psychiatrist, is Sri Lankan, working in UK, has just finished, or not just a few years ago, looked at the mental well-being in Sri Lanka. In fact, one of the old mental hospitals, Angoda, used to be the lunatic asylum, is also changed its names to Mental Health, National Institute of Mental Health now. They are also changing, although they are carrying on some other activity. And we have had seminars, we have had research activities as to small areas like social capital, which you wouldn't hear. So these things are happening in Sri Lanka, which probably many of us will not know. I'm merely trying to bring it up to show that there is this area of activity which we are not very familiar with. And of course, look at the international global situation. UN report on global action 2015, which is coming in September. Mental health promotion is one of the key goals, following the Millennium Development Goals. Human rights development reports since about 2000, all 25 human development reports have referred to well-being. OECD guidelines, World Health Report, I can mention anything. All these things end up by saying you improve the well-being of the individual, not the money, not the amount of money that you have. So that's the well-being. And of course, people are now aware mental well-being has emerged as a major issue because of the importance, because it is the basic fundamental thing for promoting the personal growth. Without the well-being, you will not move forwards. Productivity, creativity, resilience, community-oriented activities, as was mentioned, meaningful life, purposeful life, connectivities and everything else. So that's the personal growth aspect of it, which is quite distinct from mental illness, which used to be talked about all the time. Now people are talking about the positive aspects of it. Community development, because all the time these two things are linked. And of course, prevention of mental health problems, mental illness, physical illnesses. I'm not going to details, but these are all proven. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that mental well-being is a major factor in all these areas. And we know mental, physical, and social functions are all interdependent. Unlike the Cartesian dualism where you said body and the mind were different, now it's all seen as one. All societies have something similar to mental health, although they don't use the term mental health. All societies have something. Now I was talking to Anula this afternoon, I was asking her, what is the singular word for well-being? Sapasanipa, Samurti, or whatever it is. I have spoken to many experts, but they are not able to find an appropriate word. That doesn't mean that we don't have mental health in Sri Lanka. We haven't really looked at it in that manner. And we are talking about the mental health of the mental well-being of the individuals, families, and communities. And not only the mental health professionals or psychiatrists, but all of us are talking about mental health issues. Because mental health issue is not compartmentalized, it's not in one situation, it's in all. So, I want to talk about evolving concept of well-being, because this is the local situation and the global situation so far. Now I come to my second part of the talk. What do you really mean by mental well-being? What do you really mean by health? What do you really mean by mental well-being, mental health and health? Because these are three subjects we all the time use without really realizing what these things mean and how it originated, because that's a very important aspect. And most of these studies have come from the West. Most of these things came in the 1930s, 40s, of course, it came to the help on the basis of knowledge accumulated over centuries. Although many of these people who talked about this area have visited the eastern part of the part of the world. Carl Jung, one of the promoters of this, was in Sri Lanka for about 3 weeks, living in Kandy. Emil Kraepelin, who was the father of psychiatry, was in Sri Lanka for about 1903, few days. He went back and wrote a poem called Buddha. So, although you say Western ideas, they also had a lot of input from this part of the world. And also we have got various areas of evidence coming from what's called the new public health movement. Again, I'm not going to go into details because that's a subject itself, which is very different from the old area where people talked about the social determinants, inequities in health as important factor for the health. Public mental health, people don't talk about the asylums now. People talk about the public health approach to mental health. Very different concept. Positive psychology, Martin Seligman in the 1970s, he developed this idea of positive psychology. Neurochemistry, for which, neuroplasticity, a person got a Nobel Prize for this. We no longer say the brain has stopped growing. Brain continues to grow till you die. Neuroplasticity depending on the social circumstances. And the epidemiology, we don't any longer talk about the maternal mortality or infant mortality. We talk about the disabilities. And you realize out of the first 20 conditions, about 8 of them are mental health conditions, disabilities. So mental health has become absolutely important. And large number of centers are focusing on these areas. Whether it's in the UK, USA, well-being centers now coming up, where they do collaborative research, whether it's a neurochemistry, psychology, epidemiology, or stress reduction or whatever it may be, and the evidence can come from these things. And my point, as I mentioned, the second point, take-home message is that health, well-being and mental health are rich, very rich, holistic concepts central to the human activity. It's a very important thing, the central activity. And there are 3 people I like to refer to. Henry Sigrist is from Switzerland, pioneer of national insurance in UK. Andrea Stamper from Croatia, president of the First World Health Assembly. Brock Chisholm was the president of the World Health Organization, a psychiatrist from Canada. Abraham Maslow is a humanist from the United States. These are the 4 people who are like Gang of 4. Those are people who are really behind the establishment of World Health Organization in the 1940s. They were all socially conscious people. They were all humanists. They all had a vision. Said this is what the health is going to be, and we are really reaping the benefits of that. And there was a man called Mahler. Mahler was the Director General of the World Health Organization. He met Brock Chisholm in India some time back, and Mahler asked him, what do you mean by health? That was a fascinating thing. He said, I will read this because that's a very important statement. He said, I will tell you what I was told to me by a person who really proposed this concept. I have experienced this complete physical, mental and social well-being many times as a partisan when I decided to risk my life for something. He was fighting the war, Second World War. I thought was vitally important, namely freedom from occupation. And he said, I had complete physical well-being. In that I was an individual. I could make a difference against a huge army of occupation. Then he talked about the complete mental well-being, in that I fully realized my existential freedom by deciding to risk my life for something vitally important for me. And he said, complete social well-being means, in that I knew that I should not come back alive. Somebody from my partisan group would take care of my family. So that is the whole idea behind this well-being or the health concept. And so, in facing death, this partisan maintained that he had experienced the innate and transcendental meaning of WHO health definition. That's a fascinating revelation by the first Director General of Health Services, or the WHO. Of course, these people reflected on an old idea which was developed over years by people like Adler, Jung, and various other people over the years. On three areas, they're all public health people, they're all social medicine people. They had experiences in the World War I and II. Gis Brockham fought in the World War I, World War II. Sigrist was imprisoned by Nazis during the World War II. And also they were what are called humanistic psychologists. They really believed in the human will, human power. They didn't believe in God. So they all had come from that background, and then they believed in what's called a human potential, innate ability for the person to work within the community, to live in the community, to develop the potential. And that is the basis for health. And then, what do you mean by well-being? Again, there were two components that are coming up. There was one group of people who said well-being is happiness, joy. Then other people said no, that's called the hedonistic view. The other people called what they call eudaimonic view. They said no, it's much more than that. Much more than that. It means that it's pleasure and pain is only one aspect of it, but this also means meaning and purpose of life, which I will come to, where the person manifests fully functioning as an individual. It's not only a temporary joy or happiness, it's much, much more than that. Again, Martin Seligman, one of the authors, he's a key person in positive psychology movement, referred to Buddha. And he fascinatingly quotes, he said, the concept of sukha in Buddhism, cultivation of mental balance and understanding of the nature of phenomena, or the wisdom and the morality. And also he talked about the recognizes one's kinship with the other beings living as a part of the community. So they are, all the time, these concepts are very similar to what we have all known. Although we try to say, no, Sri Lanka, Asia is very much a community kind of thing, not an individualistic society, whereas the West is highly individualistic. But actually, these two are very much together ingrained. Mental well-being is obviously developed by a large number of centers, as I had mentioned earlier. I don't want to go into details. There are different kinds of models depending on the center from which that it comes. But basically, it's a dynamic thing. It's all the time. It's, in fact, Martin Seligman talks about the flow or energy. It's all the time moving to develop their innate potential, work productively and creatively, build strong and positive relationships, as I mentioned, contribute to their community, and also enhance in the personal and social goals and the purpose in life. So it's all these things, not only joy and happiness. Well-being, in other words, contented people, energized people, sense and purpose, all that. So it's said as a state of being of alignment, body, mind and spirit. And how do we realize this? That is the basic question that all of us have to answer all the time. In short term, it is to realize the complete physical, mental and social well-being. An individual or a group must be able to identify and realize aspirations. What is it that you want in life? To satisfy the needs and the change or cope with the environment in which we are living in. I think I'll have to skip many of these slides because of the time problems. In very simple terms, 5 ways of well-being. We talk about take notice of other people, be alert. Give back, compassionate, grateful people. Connect with other people. work with other people, be active and alert, and learn all the time. I think I will skip many of these things. And I'll come to my third point, mental health. Mental health is basically the foundation for mental well-being. I said mental well-being is a dynamic state. It's all the time. It's functional. But mental health is the foundation. They are the resources for the manifestations of well-being. It's for effective functioning of the individual and the community. So WHO defines as a state of well-being, contented, connected, secure, energized, all these beautiful terms. And 4 things, he says, individual realizes his own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, work productively and fruitfully, and able to make contribution to the community. So community comes in all the time, actually. So the present understanding is it's a resource. It's a hard material that's there inside. Whether it's the form of personality traits, attributes, or whatever the term that you use, it's there. In fact, Abraham Maslow says it's there in all of us. It's just that we are not able to recognize and unearth it. And in the US, when they did a project, they interviewed a large number of people, and they asked what percentage of people make use of their innate potential. They said not even 10% of innate potential is not made use of by the people. They don't even know that they have that potential. So positive mental health considers mental health as a resource. It is essential to subjective well-being and to our ability to perceive, comprehend, and interpret our surroundings, to adapt or to change if necessary, and communicate with the others and social interactions. Because these things we are doing all the time, but there is an energy for that. There is what is the fuel behind it is the mental health. This is a very interesting thing. There was a report that came in the UK called Mental Capital. And it's a very authoritative report that came from the Department of Science, which I will show you later on. They also talked about this quite in a big way. They asked the questions, what kind of people Britain should have during the last 20 years, next 20 years. Because the world is evolving, Britain is evolving. What kind of people should Britain have so as to respond to the needs in 20 years? And they came out with a beautiful report saying the need to develop the mental capital, just like the social capital, or economic capital, or whatever the other capitals are. I will skip this because it's... Now I come to my third point. What are the determinants? How is the well-being or mental health... Oh, sorry, am I... and we talk about social environment, social development resources, health, education, employment, housing. Social capital, as was mentioned, based networks together with shared norms, values, understanding. That's the glue of the society in which we live in. And unless it is there, the society doesn't function. This also we'll skip. Then we talk about how to promote mental health of populations, and all the evidence that suggests is offering individuals and communities to take control of the factors determining health, or empowerment, because that is going on the basis of the potential, and the supreme individual is the person we are talking about, and providing a conducive environment. This we will skip. Sorry. Just about this, Martin Seligman, he brought about this issue of positive psychology. What he says is, although you have a resource, this resource can be developed. That's his whole idea. Then there is another man, this is his theory behind it: creativity, bravery, kindness, perseverance, and optimism. It's a very interesting man called Richard Davidson, who said you can learn things just as much as you train your muscles. The brain functioning, mental functioning. That's the second thing. Third person came and said, just as much as you develop your emotions, positive aspects, once you enlarge your things, your wisdom will grow. Your approach, your alertness, your judgment, so many things, exploration capacity, all that will grow. And then, of course, we have this big man, John Kabat-Zinn, famous person, professor of medicine in Massachusetts, who introduced the Theravada Buddhism concept of mindfulness. This is a big report, Mental Capital and Well-being in UK. They have gone to town and started asking questions. What should we do to improve the mental capital of British people who are living in Britain at the moment? Last, what about Sri Lanka? There is a strong case for responding to emerging mental health and well-being needs. There is no doubt about it, because people want it. When the people want to see us, even at this stage, they will ask hundreds of questions for which we have no answers. And I think number one, what you have to do is enhance the value attached to mental health. If you don't value it, then of course you will not have it. If you value your buildings, then of course you'll have buildings. But if you want human beings who are able to think creatively, you must invest in people. And of course, co-issues and integration of the system. And there are 4 issues which Dr. Samarasekaran also will be able to talk about. We normally talk about the knowledge development in Sri Lanka. From kindergarten to the university, all the time we give knowledge. But we don't develop the vessel in which the knowledge is accumulated. Creative ability, we don't do that. So we'll have to get out of that. Creativity is not part of Sri Lanka. It's imitation. You imitate, you have one campus, you have another campus, very similar, another teaching hospital, It goes on and on like that. And all compartments, different compartments. And reform is hardly any. People are very difficult to face the reforms. So, finally, advocacy, leadership. And I want to leave you with an interesting quote from Buddha. The mind when undeveloped and uncultivated entails great suffering. That's what he says. And I think more importantly, I wasn't going to show this, but somebody referred to Albert Einstein. And he says a very interesting thing. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has spoken the gift. Thank you.